Welcome back to A Moment in History. I'm Seth Udinski. In this segment, let's take a journey back in the history of America and discuss something of great importance to our country's legacy. We'll explore a battle within our nation, and it's one that touches on religion, class, race, politics, and so much more. It involves the protection and defense of the most vulnerable people group in human society, unborn children. Let's explore the complicated and marked history of the fight for the protection of life in America. Now, sadly, I have to tell you that this moment in history is in many ways a black mark on our country, but we cannot tell the story and see the goodness that comes out of such a black mark without touching on the preeminent legal case in the fight for life, and that was Roe v. Wade in the United States Supreme Court in 1973. Before Roe v. Wade, abortion was virtually illegal across the United States. It was up to the states to determine the legality of pre-birth infanticide, and until the 1960s, literally all the states in the Union agreed that abortion was a crime, with few exceptions. Now, in the late 60s and early 70s, as the sexual revolution began its first stages, a handful of states legalized the procedure, but on the eve of Roe v. Wade, abortion was still a crime in the nation. Then in 1973, the United States Supreme Court issued a ruling on a case between a woman from Texas who became known as Jane Roe and Henry Wade, a prosecutor in Texas who had argued that the woman's 1969 abortion should be punished under the law. On January 22, 1973, the Supreme Court shockingly ruled in favor of Jane Roe, and in doing so shattered Texas's laws criminalizing abortion. The ruling opened the door for widespread and legalized abortion in the United States. And for the next 49 years, 63.5 million babies were murdered in the womb in the United States. Now, I don't mean to bring a dark cloud over today's moment in history, but this is something that we must talk about. It is one of the greatest evils of this generation and of this country's history that many innocent babies have been robbed of life. This is a genocide unprecedented in world history and 10 times as deadly as the Holocaust of World War II. Now, this moment in history should remind us of the great need to stand up and speak out for those who cannot. But more than that, I hope that we are reminded today of the great love that God has for the little ones. So let's be encouraged today as we think about these little lives that God knew and loved each of them from the moment that they were conceived. Now, on A Moment in History, we often study history from the long past, but in the very recent past, by God's grace, in fact, in the summer of 2022, the United States Supreme Court, led by a heavily conservative majority, overturned the ghastly Roe v. Wade decision under severe controversy at the time. And it was one of the great examples of God's grace in recent memory, where one of the most horrid Supreme Court rulings was turned on its head. And in the next year alone, more than 30,000 babies' lives were saved because of it. Thanks so much for joining me once again for A Moment in History.